where everybody says, oh well, but of course when it comes to war powers, we don't follow the Constitution anymore. I mean, that's a frightening thing, and it explains how we can go off on other very dangerous illiberal tangents, like authorizing torture in the name of the United States, explicitly against federal law and explicitly against the 8th Amendment to the Constitution, which forbids cruel and unusual punishment. Okay, look also finally at, there's one other thing before we get to the Bill of Rights I wanted to cite. Oh, I know. In Article 6, let's see, do I have this in the right place? I'm looking for, well, I'll come back and find, I can always lose this. Well, my favorite clause says that Congress shall award no titles of nobility. I always lose it, but I'll find it in a second. But anyway, again, we have a democratic, anti-monarchical form of government. It is against our Constitution for Congress to award any title of nobility and for any officer of the United States to accept any gift from any prince or king of a foreign country. Again,
it's the last clause of Section 9 of Article 1.
Okay.
Article 1.
Thank you for that. Is it right in Section 9? All right, but let's go now to the Bill of Rights. Okay, and this is really the key thing. If you talk about the First Amendment of the Constitution, we allow no established church. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Well, our Constitution was written against the background of centuries of religious wars that were gotten into by princes and kings in Europe who decided that they wanted to fight over religion. So one of the first things that Jefferson and Franklin and the founders wanted to do was to disentangle church and state and say, sure, if you want to fight about religion in the private space, you go ahead and do it, but that is not going to be a matter of public discussion because we want reason to govern in public. So we knew we were in trouble after 9/11 when President Bush declared the war against terror a holy crusade. I think the language of crusade was withdrawn, but that moved in precisely the opposite direction of what the Constitution indicates. The First Amendment obviously also includes the freedom of speech, which means that everybody, all citizens, including people in the military, I would argue, have a right to speak about war and about military conflict and to participate in national discussion about the most central questions, including military conflict. All right, well, I'll leave it at that. But remember the basic point here, which is that we don't live in a national security state. We don't live in a monarchy. We live in a constitutional republic that is still struggling to become a democracy. And I think that the adoption of a constitutional amendment guaranteeing every citizen the right to vote and the right to have a vote counted will be an important forward step in our making certain that democratic forms prevail. But all of the structural provisions of our Constitution militate against war and build an important popular checks against the kind of thing that we saw under President Bush, where a president decided to act like a king. Thanks.
So we're going to have a little bit of time for questions. And I think that we're going to do, if you were around last night, we're going to do like we did last night. And that is allow 3 people to ask a question to give us a little tea about, and also make sure that more people have an opportunity to ask questions. Because you know it is an occupational hazard of politicians to speak too long. So we'll start here.
Hi. One of the problems with interpreting the Constitution very strictly, I found, is the libertarian view of the Constitution. And I'm looking at the 10th Amendment, which now the Republicans are misusing, I think. But basically, what the 9th and 10th Amendments both say is that we can't foresee the future. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So just because it's not written in the Constitution doesn't mean it can't happen. And this is what are called constitutional strict constitutionalists go by that, especially in domestic issues. But they go by that, there's a fine line is what I'm saying, I guess. There's a fine line between the strict interpretation of the, if it's not there, you don't do it. And how could the founders have ever have known about computers and have known about cars and the kind of environmental problems we have today? So just throwing that out there for you to maybe talk about.
Yeah, I want you to go back to the point you made, Senator Madaleno, about the state legislature having the right or the legal capacity to allow the governor to refuse. The governor can refuse without the states, with the state legislature being silent also, right? Is that true? It's not required. So what's the particular critical addition it makes for a state legislature to speak to governor's powers to refuse the use of force? What does it add to our campaign, our mobilization of people against the war? What exactly is it doing in your mind?
Thank you.
Mike, could you paraphrase that question? It's hard to hear.
The question, correct me if I'm wrong, is what is it at? She makes the point that if it's already the law, it's already the law. And so what does it add to clarify that a governor should have the power to object to an illegal order?
Yeah, in April of 1970, amidst of ever-growing opposition to the Vietnam War, the Massachusetts legislature passed a law that, quote, directed the state attorney general to challenge the war's legality on behalf of Massachusetts residents ordered to Vietnam. And that actually became an important case, among others, toward the end of the Vietnam War to chip away at the prior holding somehow that this was a legal war. I'm wondering whether any of you have considered this, in addition to your important home guard bills, issuing a bill that essentially do the same thing, to direct the state attorney general of your state to initiate legal action challenges going forward.
I think I will start, and I'm going to take on the second question in particular. You're right. If we're right, it's already the law of the land. It's already the Constitution. It's already in the War Powers Act. But I think I would go back to something Dr. Halpern says, and that's that we all want to hide from that. And by advancing these bills, which is a way to advance this argument. And to be honest, the way that I publish an idea, the tool I have, is to write a bill. And the way I try and spread people's knowledge about it is to have a hearing on that bill. So that's the reason. That's the reason to get it introduced in 20 or 30 or so states and to have hearings and, by George, to pass it somewhere. We, by the way, have a little bit of a race going on. The Wisconsinites think they're going to be the first, but I both hope they win, and I'm going to work hard to beat them in Vermont. So I'm going to call on, who wants to?
Oh, yeah. Do you come up there? Or?
Yeah.
So the question is about the 9th and 10th Amendments, and the 9th Amendment says that the enumeration of particular rights in the Constitution shall not be construed to deny or disparage other rights that are retained by the people, which I think in this context clearly bolsters the argument that the people have a right through all of their institutions to participate in dialogue about war and entry into war and conduct of war and so on. And the 10th Amendment says that the powers not delegated to the federal government are retained by the states or the people, which again I think underscores what this movement is saying. The idea that the president is the sole organ for foreign and military policy is a complete betrayal of the meaning of our Constitution and the constitutional design. It's just not right. I mean, It's Congress that raises armies and navies. It's Congress that taxes. It's Congress that can declare war. And Congress has to ratify treaties. And the people participate at every level of government in that way. So, the point I'm trying to make is that our Constitution was meant to break from a history in which one person could try to plunge the entire nation into war. And again, we've seen the catastrophic consequences of that happening as recently as the Iraq War. But it did require a major subversion of our constitutional design and institutions.
I think Mike answered your question beautifully, and that was the whole idea, I think, of the legislation, was to try to start the discussion amongst the public and even amongst our